Hello and welcome to my channel Jo Cook Yoga. I'm Jo Cook. Now today I'm going to do a video that is responding to some requests that I've had, which is to do some practices or some videos that are catered to the complete beginner. So what we're going to do in this little series, so I'm actually going to do a number of videos, is we're going to do 3 poses in each video, looking at them from absolute basics, but also building each time. Now, if you're an experienced yoga practitioner and you've found this video and got this far, I still believe that there's going to be a lot that you can do in this video, because within yoga practice there's a concept called the beginner's mind, and it's about how we approach our practice, as always trying to recapture that naivety, that lack of previous knowledge that we had when we started yoga, or that you have because you're at the beginning of your journey. And the great joy and value of that is that you don't have preconceptions. You will notice things that maybe later along your yoga journey become ignored through habit. So this space where you're a beginner is actually a really valuable space. And if you're an experienced practitioner, then there's always an aspiration to try and recapture that curiosity and that lack of preconception, prejudice, assumption that we know what a yoga pose is going to feel like. So today's 3 poses are Tadasana, mountain pose, Uttanasana, standing forward bend, and Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Now throughout I will use the Sanskrit, which is the Tadasana, Uttanasana and Adho Mukha Svanasana, but I will also use the English translations. That respects the fact that this is initially an Indian tradition. It comes from a place of the Sanskrit language, but also that there are very few Sanskrit speakers in the world, including me, so I give you a translation to give it a bit more sense and context. So Tadasana is the basic standing pose in yoga. I hesitate because it is apparently simple, but it actually, as you explore it, has a world of possibilities in it. Now, if you can do so comfortably, you're going to bring your feet together on your yoga mat. And actually, if you don't already have a chair to hand, just pause the video now and go and get yourself a chair, because you will need a chair for this practice, whether you're a beginner or not. So, if you're back with me, you're going to stand in the centre of your mat and you're going to bring your feet together. Bring the inner heel together and the joint of the big toe together. If you can, lift your toes and spread them. You may not be able to do that yet, and your big toes may veer off in a different direction. That's fine, it will come in time. But join the joint of the big toe and the inner heel. Relax your arms beside you and stand up tall. So as you stand up, I'm just going to talk you through your feet to the top of your head and things to look for and be aware of. So first of all, feel the weight on the soles of your feet. Notice if it feels more towards the ball of your foot or more towards the heel, and try to find a position that feels like a balance between the two. So it isn't just on one side or the other. And the same with the left and right foot. If you feel a definite imbalance, try to bring it to be fairly even between left and right. The leg muscles, although you could just stand there doing very little with the leg muscles, that's not what Tadasana is about. We want the strength of a mountain. That's what we're trying to bring. So we want to lift upwards with the leg muscles, and without tensing the muscles, we want to see if we can gently but firmly draw them inwards towards the bone. Some instructions in yoga don't make sense the first time you hear them. That's completely normal. Some instructions in yoga don't make sense the 50th time you hear them, and that is also completely normal. Our bodies will understand them when they're ready. So if you can get your body to understand, draw the muscles towards the bone in the legs. So this is not a clenching, it's not tense or aggressive, but it's a firmness in the legs. Straight knees. Now the pelvic girdle, pelvis around your hips, be aware of whether you're sticking your bottom out. I'm going to turn sideways for the rest of this. You can stay exactly as you are. So we don't want the bottom to stick out. And the tailbone is this area, the very base of your spine. Just draw that in slightly, and there is an opposite or a related action, which is to move your tummy back slightly. So don't overdo that, but definitely draw your tailbone in and your tummy back. So now we're even in the feet, lifted in the legs, and tucked in with the tailbone, drawn back with the tummy. Again, the tummy is not hard, just gently drawn back. Now coming up to the front ribs, that's this area here. Be careful that as I ask you to lift your chest, which is the top area, they don't push out. So what we don't want is that, which again would be the tailbone will start to go out as well. So lift your chest as much as you can, so like you're very proud of something, but keep the very front ribs and the bottom of the front ribs just where they started, in a neutral position. With your shoulders, you want to draw them around to the side of your body, so not dropping forwards, but draw them around to the side of the body, which might mean like it feels like you're slightly drawing them back, so that if you put your hand on your leg, it would be right on the side of your thigh. And then from the shoulders, actually, you don't want your hands on your legs, you just want your arms to gently but definitely draw downwards, and the hands to be a little distance away from the side of the body. And then finally, feel your head. So feel that your head is on straight as best you can. So you may have lifted the chin in an effort to feel lifted in the body. If you sense that, just bring your chin down to be level. If you feel that you're short in the back of the neck, that might also mean that you've done that. But if you feel that your throat is closed up, then maybe you need to lift the chin. So aiming for the jawline and the chin to be level with the floor, so that the top of your head feels like you could balance a book on it. And then we can release that. Now, if you worked with your feet together and that was uncomfortable on your back, or you find other sensitivity with having your feet together, then you can do exactly the same pose, feet apart. We're not going to repeat that right now, but for future reference, you can put your feet apart for Tadasana as well, and both are acceptable. And in a normal class, sometimes I will say feet together, sometimes apart, and often there's a reason for that, or sometimes it's to vary things. We're going to move on to do Uttanasana, or standing forward bend, and you're going to need your chair. So bring your chair. I'm going to go sideways onto you. You should probably face the screen that you're looking at me on, so you can look while you do. Now we are going to have the feet apart, and we're going to have them a generous distance apart. So at least underneath your hips, but probably a little bit wider. This green mat is actually slightly wider than an average yoga mat, but you want your feet to not be quite as wide as the yoga mat, but getting there. Look down and see that your feet are parallel, so your toes aren't turning in or out. Straight legs again, so begin with that Tadasana feeling. So you have your feet apart now, but stand in the Tadasana shape. It reoccurs all the way through yoga practices. It's where pretty much, well not pretty much, it's where every standing yoga pose starts. So be in Tadasana, that lifted shape. Then keep your torso straight, keep your legs straight, but you're going to fold in the middle. So put your hands at the folding point of your body, which is below the tummy and above the pubic area. And fold over your hands. Imagine that you're folding over your hands, and bring your hands to the chair. Now, being a beginner doesn't necessarily mean that you're stiff, but for some of us it does mean that you're limited in movement at the moment. So whether or not you could take your hands lower, for this first time we're going to have the hands on the chair. Straight legs, coming forwards, and then let's just breathe in and stand up. So you know whether that was actually a challenge to get your hands that low. And if it was, you could turn the chair around, or not even turn the chair around, but actually take your hands to the chair back instead of the chair seat. Okay, so you can take your hands to the chair seat ideally, but if you're still working to be able to do that, you could take your hands to the chair back, and you could have the chair turned either way, it doesn't matter. What we're going to focus on now is the essential point of this pose, which is that we are aiming for that straight legs and the straight back. And to get that, we've got to understand the relationship between these two body parts, between the spine and the legs. So that's what we're going to do now. So I want you to take your hands to the chair seat again. If that is very easy for you, you feel like you can get your hands very easily down. And remember, you're practicing at home, no one else can see you, it doesn't matter what your ego tells you. Be honest with yourself, listen to what your body says. So if it's not easy, then don't go lower. But if you could go lower, maybe take your forearms onto the chair, or the halfway is to bend the elbows a little bit. So go to the place where you feel a little bit of stretch in your legs. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then you're going to lift your sternum. So your sternum is here, the top centre chest. It's the bone in the centre of the chest that connects the front ribs, joins the front ribs. You're going to lift that forwards. And you're going to draw your tailbone down and your tummy up. And you're going to make sure your shoulders are going away from your ears. So we're lifting the sternum forwards. We've got a bit of stretch in our legs, but not too much. Now in that position, keep your chest lifting forwards. You're going to bend your knees a little bit. And you should feel, even if you're flexible, there is now even more ability for you to lift your chest forwards. Even more ability for your shoulders to comfortably move away from your ears towards your hips. So the shoulders move towards the hips, away from the ears. Now, watch your back, watch how it feels as you re-straighten the legs. And you'll feel the relationship that as your legs get more challenged with the stretch, it is more challenging to keep the back flat and straight and lifted forwards in this way. So breathe in and come up. That's the basic dynamic in this pose, that to straighten the legs, it would be easier to round the back. To round the back, it would be easier to bend the legs. And what the pose asks us to do is both at once. So we're going to do it one more time, and we're going to go a little bit further into that sense of stretch, but with this knowledge that we need to be doing both at once. Okay, so we're going to do the bending knees technique again, but if you're able to do a little bit more stretching, you can take your hands a little bit lower. Now is the time to explore rather than push too hard into these stretches. So feet are apart still, underneath your hips or a little wider. Tadasana, and then fold at the hips, the legs stay straight. Bring your hands to your support. Lift your chest forwards. If you feel like your legs have got a bit more stretch in them and you can keep your back flat, so no rounding, no tight back where you feel like it could be like a drum. We want it to be soft, flat, lifting forwards. So go a little further into the stretch if you can maintain that. Keep the shoulders comfortable. This is not a pose that should challenge your shoulders. And then we bend the knees a little. And we bend the knees to feel the freedom in the back, to notice the relationship that as we let the hamstrings have less length, the back gets more space. Now try and keep that space in your back as you push your feet through the floor and straighten the legs. So what we don't want to see is as we straighten the legs, the back goes, okay, I have to give in now. We want to be on whatever height we need for our hands and able to keep the straight flatness in the back as well as straightening the legs. Breathe steadily through all this work, and then we're going to breathe in and come up. So for our last pose, it's exactly the same relationship. It's Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog pose is the direct translation of that one. And it is one of the classic yoga poses. We're going to work with a chair, at least initially. And you're going to brace your chair against a wall. So by brace, I mean you're going to make sure that the chair can push against something, because you're going to put your hands on there. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you the shape of the traditional pose, which is to begin on all fours for today. There are different ways to begin, but begin on all fours, tuck your toes under, lift your knees up, straighten out your legs, and you make an upside down V shape. Okay, so some of you might be able to do that fine already, but we're going to begin with a very supported version so that those of you who maybe don't have the strength in the arms, the legs, it's an all body pose, have an option. And this is an excellent option for all sorts of reasons. And those of you who could do the pose on the floor have the space to explore what's going on in your body. So your chair, you are going to take your hands either side of the chair seat and you're going to grip the chair seat. And you can see I'm doing a really similar shape to Uttanasana, to the pose we just did. You're going to bend your knees and you're going to step your feet back. So that instead of vertical with the legs, which is what we aim for in the forward bend, we are now slanting diagonally in the legs. And you can take your feet maybe even a little bit wider. So I'm holding on to my chair so I don't slip with my hands. I have straightened my legs. If you can, I'm lifting my sternum up and it's kind of aiming to the top of the chair back, and I'm moving my shoulders towards my hips again. And I'm going to see if I can lift my hips back towards the wall behind me. And then step forwards and stand up. So we're going to do that a couple of times, or maybe 3 times, as we did with Uttanasana, thinking about different things. Now the first thing to say is that I had my heels on the floor, more or less. You don't necessarily need your heels on the floor. It's a very strong calf and Achilles tendon, so back of the heel stretch. So if that place in your body doesn't stretch very well, you might not get your heels on the floor. That's fine. In fact, it's not what you would aim to do first anyway. So it's possible that for you, your heels were slightly up, okay? That's not a problem. Straight legs is more important than having your heels down, okay? So this time, when we go into the pose, we're going to work on lifting the hips as high as possible. So there's going to be a sense of lifting from the hands up to the hips and a sense of lifting from the feet up to the hips. And we're actually going to come onto the tiptoes if you can to try and help that. So think of this V action that I'm making with my arms. That's where the energy feels like it is in downward facing dog in the pose. So you're going to place your hands on the chair again. You're going to step back quite a long way, and you can do it in several steps, completely fine. Begin with bent knees and push your hands into the chair and lift your hips up and back. Just make sure you don't push your tummy to the floor, so lift your tummy up. If you can, bring your ears in between your arms, but your shoulders might not stretch like that yet, and roll your shoulders to the floor so that you feel like you've got space at the sides of your neck. And then, if you can, you're going to straighten out your legs, but you're actually going to be on the tiptoes so that you can feel you can lift your hips up. So I'm pushing back with my hands to lift my hips backwards and up, and I'm lifting up with my heels so that I can lift my hips up as well with straight legs. And then we're going to come forwards to the chair again and release. So that's the idea, that even though this pose has down in the name, downward facing dog, the only bit that's down is your face. It's all about lift in the energy. Now, if you do have a wrist issue, or if you're not confident in the strength of your arms or shoulders yet, I would say stay with the chair for now. If you'd like to try the floor version, or if you're totally confident in the strength of your arms, then we're going to do the floor version now. So repeat the chair version or come to the floor if you feel able. The emphasis is exactly the same this last time. It's just lifting up, okay? So you're going to bring your hands down. Place your hands a little bit wider than your shoulders. And if it feels difficult to have your fingers facing forwards because your shoulders really hunch up and there's nothing you can do about it, you can turn the hands out a little bit so that actually what faces forwards is, if I come closer to the camera, your hands at approximately that angle. So classically, middle finger faces forwards, but if you find it hard on the shoulders, then turn your hands out so the webbed part of your thumb and index finger here is what faces forwards. So your hands would be more like that, and then your shoulders can turn out. So you have those two options. So place your hands a little bit wider than the shoulders, a little bit of space between each finger, Move your knees so that they are further behind than your hips, so that there is a slant back in the legs. So there should be a slant back from wrist to shoulders and a slant back from hips to legs. So we're wide all four. This distance is wide. Draw the shoulders back towards your hips. So again, I've said that in both of the last two poses. Shoulders back towards your hips. Tuck your toes under. Knees stay bent to begin with, but we lift the knees off the floor and take the hips up and back. Keep your eyes travelling a little way forwards on the mat if your neck's happy with that, so that you lift your sternum in that direction. Roll the shoulders away from your ears, lift high in the hips, and then as we did in forward bending when we stood up, when you straighten your legs now, notice what happens in your back, because quite often the back again will round. So only straighten the legs as far as you can straighten them and keep that back nice and flat. So that might be all the way. That's lovely. It's great if you can get there. But it's also great if you can have the awareness to stop straightening the legs when you start to feel your back rounding, because then you've learned that relationship. And now we're going to come out of the pose. So if you stepped back from the chair, then you will step forwards again, or you'll lower your knees to the floor. And then if you're able to kneel, you're just going to sit back onto your feet. If you're not able to kneel, then you can come straight up from there. Give yourself a few breaths to come back to normal. And then stand up. So that's the end of what we're going to explore in today's video, but if it sparked your curiosity, I would suggest rewind and do all of that again, because doing it a second time you will get different things out of it. Or as I put the videos up over the next few weeks, maybe you could go on to the next video, which will be linked in the description box down below. Thank you for watching, and do let me know in the comments down below if there's anything specific that you would like me to cover or anything to clarify, and I will try and do that in future videos. See you again soon. Bye bye.